So if you're considering moving outside of your country and trying to go live abroad, be a digital nomad or live in the geo-arbitrage world that I think has a lot of benefits, then this video is perfect for you. So my name is Eric Piccione. If you don't know who I am documenting my journey to financial freedom and trying to give practical advice along the way on our own specific path. A lot of the topics that I talk about are geo-arbitrage and just like ways to stretch your dollar a little bit further and just ways to maximize the amount of money that you actually keep in your pocket, because it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. That really does make the biggest impact. So just going to rattle this off, bullet point it. First, you need to know where you're going to go in order to live this digital nomad lifestyle and live abroad somewhere. So do you like the warmer climates? Do you like the more consistent climate? Do you like more of a cold environment? Preferably most of the time, if you're thinking more like consistent weather year round, South America makes for a great option, specifically Ecuador or maybe Colombia. They have proven to be really worthwhile decisions or options for people living abroad. There's a massive expat community in those countries and relevant countries in South America. Given that they're right next to the equator, there's a lot of really interesting weather consistencies that happen there. So whatever place you decide to live, just make sure that you do your research based on what you want, based on the climate, the lifestyle, the beliefs, the values, where you could see the most potential for you specifically, and then building a plan around that. That's how we did it. A lot of our family is going to be where we're going to be living, so it made it a no-brainer for us because we're surrounded by dozens of people that will be able to help us. We're raising a family, so that helps a ton. So next from there, how are you going to make your money? Are you going to be working locally, being a teacher or some kind of person that builds a business out in that country? And if so, what are the laws behind building a business, or like, are they business friendly countries? Those are things that you'll have to consider. Or are you going to work remotely? To me, remote jobs make the most sense, especially if you're earning American dollars, because you can stretch that so much further and in almost any condition, especially if you're factoring in healthcare, housing, just like general costs that go with standard life, internet bill, phone bill, all of that. When it's all factored in, you're often going to stretch that at least 25 to 50% more by taking American dollars and transferring it over to another country and working remotely and just living a modest lifestyle. Just because you now are saving more doesn't mean that you should look to spend more and more money. That's not the goal here. It's to have a good quality of life and just be comfortable in your day-to-day and just ideally save up faster for a goal that you have in mind. So where do you want to go? How are you going to earn your money? And then you'll need to get your documents in order, like your visa and everything else that comes with moving abroad. So whether you have to look at what kind of country you're going to and how feasible is it to get documents for it. Oftentimes the most popular option is maybe a tourist visa for you to be able to be there for a couple months, just get a feel for the country. But if you're farther along and you're really ready to make that jump, there's oftentimes like a golden visa, which you invest in the property or in some kind of real estate over there. And, that's worthwhile. Not everyone has a lot of money laying around to be able to do those kind of things. So the most feasible in many cases is just finding a job locally and just working in that country. I mean, that's the fastest way to get it. But the issue there is a lot of times whenever you change jobs, or if you do change jobs, you will have to restart the whole process. And oftentimes you'll have to like leave the country, get the work situation figured out, and then come back under that company. So it makes things a little complicated. A lot of times, if you have family or relatives or someone that lives in that country already, that's the easiest because you can just kind of piggyback off of that status, and then you'll have an invitation that allows you to come into that country and live there. So of course, every country has their own rules or regulations around what's needed to be able to live in that country, but that's something that you'll have to look into in terms of what documents are required. and then of course what visas are needed that will help you live there for multiple months at a time. And if it's something that if it's a country you really, really like, then by all means look into a permanent residency and of course start learning the language of that country as soon as possible, preferably months in advance, if not years, so that you have a leg up and an advantage to be able to smoothly transition into that country. And then from there, you have to look into the mail system. So, are you going to just burn the bridges and just move completely, sell off everything you own in your country or in America and just move on out? Or are you going to keep a mailbox or some kind of way to get mail and just come back every couple months, every like 3 to 6 months? How is that going to work? A lot of times you can get a virtual mailbox that allows you to be able to have the mail company or the delivery companies do a scan or scan all the documents that are needed, and they'll just send it over via PDF or like in an email. And those are good services. I think they're worthwhile if you do have family that lives in that city or state that you're leaving from. It would be great to have them pop in every couple months and or collect your mail and then eventually open only the things that you give them authorization for. Or you just say, hey, every 6 months I'll come back and pick the items or the documents that I want the most. So it kind of plays into what are you wanting to do as far as your living situation. I mean, in most cases, virtual mailboxes make the most sense, but again, totally up to you. This is a big one. So banking is a common question that people often have in terms of how to live abroad. And personally, I like Charles Schwab. They're by far the best banking system that I've come across. And if you do want to set up a bank account with them, I will leave a link below. Very easy. The debit cards they provide, they have no international fees. Keeps it super simple. You can also invest in retirement funds, stocks, treasury bills, and everything else like you could with the traditional brokerage through Schwab. Their customer service is fantastic. They're one of, if not the best accounts. Just there's no minimums, there's no fees. It's like by far, to me, the best bank that you can work with. The only challenge or the con that I've run into is that there's no physical banks. So you will have to do everything online or over the phone. But again, the customer service is fantastic. And yeah, I would say Schwab would be an amazing option, especially if you're looking for a place to like save some money in like an emergency fund. You can use a high yield savings account, but I like treasury bills because you don't get hit with these income tax. You don't get hit with yeah, that's right, income tax. My bad. So the nice thing about treasury bills is that you don't get taxed on the interest that you make, at least statewide, but you still get hit with federal tax as a whole, which is fine. But to me, T-bills make sense, and you can do that with Schwab, so it makes sense. Now, from there, you got to consider, are you going to bring cash, which I would definitely recommend. If you are traveling abroad, it's really helpful. I mean, of course, depending on how long of a time you're going to be in that country, how much cash you'll need. If you're going for a month to 3 months, maybe 3 times the amount that you think you might need to bring, and just to give yourself a good safety net, because the worst thing is to not have cash available, especially when you're abroad. So I would say bring some cash. As far as a specific number, 2 to 3 times what you feel comfortable bringing, or what you feel like you would actually spend, and then multiply that would be ideal. And then from there, as far as how much funds should be available in your bank, I would say from whatever country you're leaving from, especially in this case in the US, I would recommend having 6 months of living expenses saved up in American dollars, so that in the event that something happens, in many cases, no matter what country you're in, you still got in that currency, 8 months, 12 months or more of savings put away before you need to like start looking for alternative methods. And that's plenty of a buffer. So I'd say have an emergency fund of at least 6 months, and in a bank account, and maybe bring 3 months or 2 or 3 months worth of living expenses in that country's currency would be ideal. At least that's how we're doing it. or that's how we've been doing it, and it's worked fine. You know, it's a comfortable way to navigate it. Obviously, you'll need a place to live. So, this is another big one. Are you going to be staying with family members if they live in that country? Are you going to be staying in an apartment? A lot of times, the fastest and most feasible way is to book like an Airbnb or a short term housing for a month to 3 months while you find a physical apartment and working with an agency to do that. The challenge that you'll run into a lot of times, especially if you're not a resident or a citizen of that country, is finding a landlord that will be willing to rent to you. So it's something to keep in the back of your head whenever you're looking for housing is, you know, what kind of facility or what kind of apartment or what kind of house can you find? And a lot of times agencies will be able to help with that, where they can find like loopholes to be able to rent. And, you know, there might be a little bit more fees that are tacked onto it. So when it's all said and done, you're probably paying an extra month or two in advance to just like add some extra security. But, you know, we're bringing a dog and our young child, our daughter. And for us, the feasibility for a lot of landlords, it's not very easy to bring everyone abroad. So thankfully, my wife is a citizen of the country we're going to, so not as big of a challenge. It's still a little bit of a finding a needle in the haystack, but you know, for the time being, we'll be staying with her family, finding a short-term housing. But at the end of the day, agencies are great options to be able to find housing. And then from there, you got to consider healthcare. A lot of times, the public free healthcare that most countries offer isn't often accessible to non-citizens, so that's not really an option in many cases. So private healthcare would make a ton of sense. There's usually a verification process. They just need to see proof of residency once you're there, in many cases, and then you can get your insurance or your healthcare and whatever option you go for. It's a hit or miss. Every country is a little different in the processes that are needed to follow in order to get healthcare, but usually it's private insurance, you know, maybe $200 or $300 a month, if not a little bit less in terms of what you would expect. And that's like for pretty solid healthcare abroad. Whereas, you know, we've been paying $800 to like $1,200 a month US dollars for crap insurance, but that's another conversation. Lastly, you got to figure out what kind of funding system or what are you going to use to be paying for everything. Honestly, I mean, as much as cash is king, it's very convenient to be able to pay with a credit or debit card. I'm a big fan of credit cards because you can get the mileage and the points that come with it. And especially if you have like a really kick-ass card, you can do some real damage. So I actually love the Venture X or the Capital One Venture X card. That is my holy grail. I use it for everything. And it's fantastic because you get 75,000 miles when you first sign up, which is the equivalent cash value of like $750. But what you do is you transfer it to another airline, like Turkish Airlines, for example. And instead of it being worth like $750, it's, you know, in some cases it can be worth 3 to 5 times what you transferred. We booked a flight recently for $0 out of pocket that would have costed us $4,000, and we transferred everything, and it was like 120,000 miles. So the transfer value is insane if you can move it to an airline partner. And they've got a couple. They're more international friendly, so there's a couple good options out there. You also get 10,000 miles every single year that you hold the card. You get $300 in annual travel credit. So just on that alone, every year you get about $400 in value, and the annual fee for this card is $395. So if you add up all the credits, just if you book one trip a year, you will pay for the card entirely every single year. Plus you get $100 global entry or TSA pre-check credit, which is fantastic, which essentially means, you know, at least for one person, you'll be able to expedite your check-in process at every domestic airport in the United States. So massive, massive card. There's a ton of other benefits. You get the lounges or the premier lounges, as well as some Capital One lounges and a couple others throughout the airports. There's a lot of other benefits that come with it. Again, I will include a link to that card below in the description, but those are my top tips. I hope I gave you a little bit of clarity on what's needed in order to move abroad. Hope you enjoyed the checklist, if you will. But if you have any comments, if you want to shed some light on some other things that might not have been covered in this topic, leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notification to be notified of any future videos. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. God bless and stay tuned.